When I was 15, I experienced my best mate going through a really, really rough period of trauma, and I was their emotional support person. But at the same time, I just can't personally and professionally get around it.
Hey, I'm Zeb,
And I'm Maddie.
and welcome to the We Don't Know Yet podcast. Whilst both Maddie and I are healthcare practitioners, we understand that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to healthcare. Should you require any medical attention, please seek out your local healthcare practitioner.
Well, it's lovely to sit down with you today. It's really, really nice to meet you, I guess more formally as well. Like, obviously, we have met a couple of years ago, as we were saying off air, at some like influencer event for Rockwear. But yeah, it's really good to obviously have a chat. And even since then, like, I've sort of had you in the background of like, if I ever did a podcast, I'd love to sit down and have a chat with you. I feel like my words are just blah, 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 blah,
They're wording today.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
if I stop and cough, apologies.
Yeah,
But we'll make it work.
she woke up this morning not feeling the best, didn't you?
I feel fine. It's just that lingering cough, but it's fine. We go on. That's
Yeah.
showbiz, baby.
The show must go on.
The show must go on. Well, Milly, it's lovely to meet you. For those that are tuning in, we are sitting down today with Milly Bannister. I might hand it over to Milly to explain a little bit more about what she is and who she is and what she does. Milly, over to you.
Thanks so much for having me. It's so nice to also sit down and have a chat with you after meeting you a couple of years ago now. And yeah, so essentially my day job now is running a charity, which is always strange to say, because we are so much more than, an organizational structure. It's a Gen Z-led mental health charity. But everything that we do is completely digital. So our core product offering, we don't do any services, no helplines or counselling or anything like that. We really identified a gap in the space that is this kind of broader puzzle that is youth mental health and youth suicide prevention in our country. And we identified this gap, so we filled it with something called Good Mate Training, which essentially is peer-to-peer mental health first aid. And it's free, it's completely digital via our website or our app, and takes about 60 minutes or less to complete. And it, really just teaches young people how to safely support each other through varying levels of mental health crises. When I was 15, I experienced my best mate going through a really, really rough period of trauma, and it was quite chronic and prolonged, and I was their emotional support person. And so I was the one, getting calls at 2 a.m. or before I went to sleep at night, having my phone tucked under my pillow, and as a 15-year-old, feeling like you have the weight of somebody else's life on your shoulders is immensely isolating and really essentially traumatic. It was, looking back now that I understand my own mental health so much better and the way my brain works and what trauma can actually look like, that was really heavy time for me. And luckily, my best friend at that time, they're doing really well now. But yeah, when you're in those experiences and going through it as somebody who is so young, so under-equipped, had no education or skills around, mental health care for someone else, it can be really devastating for all parties involved. And so that's the gap that we wanted to fill. A lot of people have heard of mental health first aid in general. It's kind of like CPR, but for, the brain. But often when we talk about youth mental health first aid, it's training parents and teachers how to support, the young people in their lives, which is definitely something we need in that big puzzle. But our little piece of the puzzle is doing it on the peer-to-peer scale, because we know from our lived experience, one of our board members is a psychologist, a developmental and an educational psychologist, and she had a bunch of anecdotes as well from, young people coming into her room and their parents, obviously getting them on the wait list and then paying money for them to be there. And they'd sit down with her and they would kind of just talk about their friends and how they could, support their friends. Because obviously when you care about someone, their well-being, and them leaning on you affects you, which is what happened in my case. And so she was like, what is going on here? What is this phenomenon of this peer-to-peer support that we're kind of overlooking? And so, yeah, that's how Good Mate Training was born. And then outside of that kind of static offering, we exist on social media because that's where our demographic is. And we kind of switched things up quite recently in terms of our strategy of getting to these young people. We were initially going to the schools and the universities and, these areas that you think are going to be quite accessible, but it's really tricky because we're not really at that stage yet in terms of traditional education systems in mandating that kind of preventative mental health education. And so we just kept kind of hitting these dead ends. And so now we've really just refocused our attention on contacting young people directly, which is via social media because that's where they hang out. So that's where we hang out. And so it's kind of like this hybrid of running like a bit of like a mental health content company mixed with, the charity side of things where we are an organization and we have our board directors and, we raise funds and things like that. But then we also offer this kind of preventative mental health training program as well. So it's like a weird kind of, it's like a new age charity, I guess, where we really are serving a very particular group of people who are this unprecedented generation that we've never seen before, and that is, of course, Gen Z. And yeah, we do the best that we can in speaking to them. Our whole team is, made up of Gen Z essentially, and yeah, we kind of are just kicking the norms to the curb in terms of how we operate as a charity and how we approach young people, and just doing it the way that we know Gen Z want us to, in terms of the way that they want to be spoken to and how they like to access information. And yeah, that's where we're at today, and that's what I do for a living.
We'd like to take a break from today's episode to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, Drip Digital. They manage all of our audio and video editing as well as our social media marketing. Without them, the We Don't Know Yet podcast wouldn't be possible. So thank you again.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And like for anyone that might not understand content or might be, a bit older or in different demographics or age groups, maybe they just don't get it and might seem, I guess, it might sound strange, I suppose,
Yeah.
but you're exactly right that's where that age group is hanging out. So that's a brilliant pivot.
Yeah, and we've spoken about it before, like from the perspective of even, deep in healthcare, getting information, people aren't turning to the likes of Google anymore to, research topics and learn about different things. Whilst, there's always going to be two sides and two kind of extremes in the social media space. A lot of people are turning to that social media space to find a lot of their information and access some of these resources. So like when I first stumbled on you, because Maddie had only like mentioned you kind of at the very start when we kind of started planning for the podcast, we were like, we're going to pencil that in later down the track because we really wanted to speak to you about kind of what you're doing. But like I thought it was just fantastic because we've spoken about preventative healthcare and raising awareness and education around some of these key speaking points. But yeah, I just can't believe how fantastic of a job you guys do in that kind of social media space, and you're able to really pull in a big Gen Z kind of demographic and population by being there. So
yeah,
it's fantastic.
And even not being in schools, I feel like, as obviously someone who went through school at some point in my life, like I just don't even remember any single workshop or person that came in and presented. Like it's just sort of like, like at least I get time off class. So like actually hitting them and piquing their interest where they're more likely to be receptive to that information.
Yep. No, exactly right. And I think it's tricky because, like you said, we do have this demographic that we were originally kind of speaking to in terms of these high school decision makers and some previous board members that we've had, and parents, and they definitely find it really tricky to wrap their head around the kind of campaigns that we run. For example, the one that we just had in the past month, where we basically partnered with a bunch of Gen Z creators that we know that Gen Z know and love and watch their content every day, because they're the new community leaders. And, if they're championing this message and encouraging these conversations, then ultimately it's a really surefire way to get Gen Z involved in that conversation. And it was hugely successful, but throughout the period of, planning, it took months and months and months. And we just kept meeting people who, had our best interest at heart, but really just couldn't grasp the concept of how social media can be used for good and can be used for young people to access information. And perhaps they haven't had great experiences with social media. Perhaps some of them are parents whose children haven't had great experiences with social media. But amongst all of the misinformation and the misuse of social media, there really can be this huge potential for real, tangible social impact that can be brought offline as well. And so when we kind of looked at our numbers in terms of, we had a 450% increase in training participants through our Good Mate training. That's, huge because it's tangible. It means that there's more young people now out in the world, in their classrooms, sports teams, group chats, workplaces, university, who are out in the world, using that information that they've learned online, in their real world relationships. So it does work. And the pivot has, obviously been on paper successful for us. So it's nice to be able to prove that, and then kind of be like, okay, cool. This was kind of our first time attempting something like that. And, really staying true to not just our branding, but what our audience wants from us and needs from us, because that's how we'll continue to operate and continue to talk to our audience and continue educating them.
Yeah.
450% is insane.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
that is huge. Wow, that's and such a testament to, obviously, you're listening to what your audience and what your target market want, right?
Yeah, it seems so obvious in hindsight, right? But when you're so deep in the weeds of your own business and you're trying to, connect with your community or connect with your patients, for example, Zeb, same with you, Maddie, but it you think you're doing the right thing as a business owner, but ultimately when you take a step back and go, you know what, I don't actually have to do it that way. I can do it in a way that, is makes more sense for my audience. And that's when things start to click and your audience starts to sit up and take notice and go, oh, okay, now I understand where they're coming from and what they're trying to say to me. So yeah, it's been a massive learning curve, but a really successful one, I guess, so far.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm really interested to hear more about your journey into this space because, like going down the pathway and like you said before, working, within a charity is probably something you probably never really like saw from the perspective of just standard like direction of life. Like no one really kind of, I think, thinks of themselves ending up there. But how did you actually end up in this space? Where did it all kind of start for you?
Yeah, I very non-linear and very unexpected. But essentially I kind of just kept following what I was interested in. So after school, I started a journalism degree, hated that kind of news writing element of journalism, ended up more down the media and comms path, which is obviously a lot more generalized, and they encourage you really early on in those degrees to start building a personal brand, which I'm a huge advocate for. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. I think you can always be building a strong personal brand. And so I kind of started looking into, what does that actually look like? What are other people doing? And this was like 2015, 16. And then I moved overseas for my third year of uni to do an exchange program because I hated uni so much and just wanted to get out. But I
You're
also
like,
wanted
travel,
to
let's
finish.
go.
Yeah, but I also am really stubborn in the way that I wanted to finish the degree instead of coming back to it later. So the exchange worked out perfectly for that reason. Um, and at that time, that was kind of the first um, time that we saw the emergence of the influencer. And at that time, it was really the travel blogger that was really taking off. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, how are these people, traveling and, living these entirely glamorous lives and they're being paid for it, or they're being, gifted these opportunities to travel. And hold on, is that a personal brand? Like what are they actually building here? What is that? What is that business? Like I've always been quite interested in the way that people make money and run businesses. And so I kind of just started a profile on Instagram. And obviously back then it was just photo sharing. It was so much easier than it is now. No video, like can you imagine no videos and no stories? Like
The glory days.
Yeah, that's the real raw. Like there'd be I'm sure some younger listeners on here that probably still have no idea that was what Instagram used to look
And those
like.
deep like sepia filters,
Yeah.
like all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I used to filter everything on Instagram back in the day.
But that was the toughest decision that you had to make, was which filter to choose. And everything else was just, hit publish, throw a few hashtags. And a lot of the time, because there were less users and less, saturation of content, the algorithm would actually kind of, pre-Facebook ownership and pre-ads and everything like that. It was just a lot easier to grow. And so I jumped in at the right time essentially and started, posting photos of my travels around the States where I was and uni life and all that kind of stuff, and just started testing, you know, out who I was as a brand and as a person online. And like, it's interesting to do that at the same time that you're shaping your identity as a young human being as well. I was like 20, 21. I didn't know myself. I didn't know what I liked, what I wanted. And yet I would show up online as if like I knew exactly what I was doing and exactly what I liked and how I wanted to be perceived, which I still struggle with that today. I don't know how I want to be perceived, but it kind of, took off essentially. And then out of that, I was afforded a bunch of really cool opportunities in travel and lifestyle and just kind of made money that way, and capitalized on that peak of the industry. And when, you know, everyone was able to kind of jump in and have fun. So that was, I'm really grateful for that period. But after a while, I wanted to kind of start building a brand outside of myself as well. And I was really interested in social impact. And I was also really interested in my own kind of personal growth at the time. I think also at that time, there was probably a lot of content around like self-help on Instagram and the like therapy is cool hashtags, and the mental health content that we started to see emerge, and the conversation started to be normalized. And I found that really interesting too, and started reflecting on my own mental health journey and what I was like in high school and post this kind of traumatic period and all of that you start to piece together as you learn more about yourself. And then so I basically just started building this, I guess, portfolio of resources around like the stuff that you don't learn in school for young women and girls. And I thought I was really like, cool and had it all together and could kind of offer access to mentors that I'd started meeting in different fields in like skincare, psychology, self-defense. Like it was all like this kind of holistic approach to like, what do we not learn in school? And so, the charity kind of started out that way. And I started building the brand, which I found really, really fun. Started to getting to know the demographic, and went around to a bunch of high schools and things like that. And then COVID happened, and it was kind of a massive blessing in disguise that I had to come home to Australia and reassess, like, what does my life look like now? What does the brand look like? And that's when I started to set the charity up here in Australia instead. Renamed it from ALLKND to ALLKND, and started looking at what is actually the best resource that we can put out right now. And that's when I sat down with Amy Kate, the psychologist who's still on our board today, who's been with me since the very beginning and has a lot of really great insight. And that's how we came up with Good Mate Training. And it's all kind of just, happened pretty organically. But a very kind of strange, I guess, turn of events. But if I could offer a piece of advice to a younger version of me or someone, in a similar position where they don't really know what to do or where they'll end up or can't imagine this strong picture of what their life looks like in 5-10 years after high school, I would always say just follow your, I guess, interests and what you're passionate about, what you want to do, because that will open more doors along the way. It's like this never-ending journey of doors where you've got to keep opening them to see what's inside, and that will take you left or right or straight ahead or backwards. And it's like this really non-linear journey. But ultimately, through every door, you get closer and closer and closer to, yeah, what it is that you feel like you're meant to do, or what they always talk about in terms of what is your purpose, or what do you what's your ikigai, all of that kind of stuff, which I feel like I'm semi living out. But then I also think like in 5 years, I'll probably be in an entirely different kind of situation again. So, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, which is
Gotta be
good. And I
okay
mean,
with that.
life changes at a very rapid rate these days, especially, you know.
I think having that preconceived idea and holding that too closely can be so limiting. Like it can almost be a bit of
Absolutely.
a ceiling.
Absolutely. Yeah. And our generation, Gen Z and Gen A, they will see like 5 times the amount of career changes that our parents will,
Mm.
because industries are changing. It's very normal for us to be swapping careers. And I think we forget that when we look to our parents and their parents and look at, the grandfathers who were in the same factory job for 50 years. And it's like, that's not how our world operates anymore. And that's totally okay. So you really do have to be okay with just going with the flow and just following your interests and passions and just letting that guide you, and hope that if you're brave enough, and if you're privileged enough to be brave enough, you will end up somewhere that kind of really lights you up.
Yeah.
And so, like pre-COVID, where were you overseas? Like, were you based somewhere centrally, or were you moving
Yeah,
around pretty
I
continuously?
pretty much, but I started in San Jose in California, which is just south of San Francisco, for college, which was great, hilarious. And then I moved over to New York for a couple of years, because that's kind of where I guess the media industry was at the time, and
Mm,
it just seemed like a cool idea to go live in
yeah,
New York for a bit.
It
and
sounds very cool.
yeah, and how did you find? Because I always feel like we're not necessarily a step behind, but the US is very advanced in terms of their way of thinking and their development. Do
Mm.
you find like you got some really big insights for, obviously then during COVID coming back to Australia, using some of what you'd learned overseas to set up your foundation for growing ALLKND and developing it?
Yeah, I'd say so, a little bit, although I think the sharing of information now and trends is almost instant, especially with TikTok and especially with Gen Z really driving their own marketing machine. Like, they're setting the trends so quickly now, and they just evolve almost instantly. But I think for me, the biggest thing was, really toughing it out in America as a young, solo person, and setting up a not-for-profit in America. Like, so bizarre. Why did I do that? I don't know. I just thought that it was the right thing to do. But then coming back to Australia, it just felt so much easier to just
Yeah.
be in your home country, dealing with your own, tax system and your own country's paperwork, and also the feeling of impacting your own neighborhoods,
Yeah.
as opposed to feeling like, obviously the population in America is huge, and I don't have experience of growing up there, and the culture is very different. The communities are very different. Whereas coming home felt like, okay, I feel like I can understand the community better, and I can almost feel the impact. So that felt really nice. And I wouldn't at this stage want to live back there again. I just really appreciate being home.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be so nice after all that time away coming back as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just to clarify, obviously, I guess it sounds like ALLKND is the overall brand, and then underneath or inside that is the Good Mate training. Is that right?
Yeah. So ALLKND is the charity, and then Good Mate Training is the product. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing.
What drew you to Gen Z? Because with a lot of the stats starting to come out, especially post COVID, around mental health disorders and challenges that people face during that time. Was there something that really drew you to the Gen Z population? Is it just because of the fact that we're kind of within that Gen Z space? Like, what drew you towards it?
Yeah, lived experience of, essentially growing up online, and understanding how that impacted my development and my peers, and knowing that the young people who have come after us and continue to do so will be even further challenged by having access to that information and that experience of being so chronically online even earlier, and how that would affect their development. It's extremely worrying. And you might have seen in the news that, Whipper, that,
Oh, I was listening to
have you-
this and telling Zeb about it the other day. Was it you or someone? Yeah, Whipper's driving the sort of band. What's it, 36 months or 24 months or something?
correct, 36
Yes.
months.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And look, I get it, especially because everyone involved is a parent of, a young teen girl within that age demographic that they're attempting to remove social media from, which is 13 to 16, I believe.
Mm.
Um, but at the same time, I can't personally and professionally get around it. I wouldn't support it either, because I get it. I know that there are really detrimental effects of, information addiction and social media misuse. And I attended an event run by the Butterfly Foundation really recently as well. So I'm totally cognizant of that, and I'm empathetic of all of that. And I really, really feel for young girls and all genders growing up online now. But at the same time, I also think that social media can be a really special place for a lot of people. Touching on the campaign that we've just run, we actually got to do an in-person event this Tuesday last week, actually, and we got to invite some community members of the creators that we worked with. And some of these creators have really, really engaged audiences who are really young, and they're really severely dedicated. And to them, these creators are a huge part of their world, and they look up to them. That's their community leader, that's their hero, that's their role model, that's their feel-good content, it's their escapism. And so them having access to really wonderful role models like those creators is really important for their development as well. And then you look at the micro communities that are built within those creator communities, and there's this sense of belonging, acceptance, shared language, and that is also a really important part of how we grow and identify ourselves, and it can feel really, really good. So there's positives, and there's obviously, some really big negatives, but I don't believe that attempting to remove social media from 13 to 16-year-olds is entirely effective. I think it is so much more nuanced than that. It really is way more complex than just saying, we'll remove it. Like, people will lie about their age. There'll be more issues that arise out of that. I think it's a tricky conversation, and we could talk about it for hours, but it needs to be way more complex than, oh, I'm a father and I don't like that my young girl is being exposed to content that makes her feel shitty. I'm just going to remove it. Boom,
Yeah.
done. Let's rally around that as a campaign. It's like, that's not the full story. That's absolutely not the full story.
Media literacy, like, esteem building, body image, all that sort of stuff, just in that specific area even.
Yeah, exactly right. So yeah, but in explanation of why Gen Z, it's because it is such a complicated generation, and it's a really good example of what it looks like to have this kind of chronic swelling of anxiety around the past, the present, and the future. There is so much going on for this generation that potentially their parents didn't experience. And so providing preventative mental health care to this generation is just something that I'm really passionate about.
Yeah, which is fantastic. And like you said as well, almost trailblazers in a sense of, this is the first lived experience for, a lot of us with, using technology and being open to so much stimulation from
Yeah.
social media, and it is a space where there are extremes on both ends, but there's also a really nice middle point where you can see a lot of this preventative stuff benefit a lot of people. So so
Absolutely.
tricky. I definitely agree with you.
I can imagine COVID would have made things even more complicated for that, period of time where people were more chronically online, particularly those young people. That was their way of communicating with their friends and sort of entertainment, why they weren't able to leave the house rather.
Yeah, exactly. It's accessibility in a way. And by removing that accessibility to whatever it is that young person cares about, that can be, almost more damaging than them having access to safe social media use.
Yeah.
And really quickly, I just wanted to touch on your championships that you just
It
finished
looked
up with.
so
It
fun.
honestly looked amazing. Walk us through, because obviously that was part of your key campaign for your Good Mate training. Walk us through who you kind of had in, because we saw I don't. No, it's already come out on all the Instagram, so we can release who the winner is and everything like that.
How would
But
you know if it hadn't been released?
I was like, "That's what am I thinking?" I was like, "Oh my god, no! What am I doing? What am I doing?" Wait, I do know. I do know. I saw it on Instagram. But Taz and Alessia won last week, which is really exciting. But walk us through a little bit about kind of the promising numbers that you guys saw from that campaign as well.
Yeah, it was really wonderful. As I said, it was our first year running this, and it really was a reflection of our change in strategy and the way that we want to operate as, a product and as a brand. And as a movement, I guess, as well as this mission to, educate young people in peer-to-peer mental health first aid. And so we kind of looked at our number one KPI, which was, first of all, we want to build a large digital community of, educated and compassionate young Australians. And then we want to kind of nurture them into trained good mates. So we want to, at some stage, whether it takes them, 3 days or 3 months or 3 years to partake in good mate training, that's fine. That's up to them. Not everybody is, in a safe space to be able to do that immediately. But ultimately, we want to nurture them into, the good mate training. And we looked at, okay, well, if our number one top of the funnel is building this digital community, how do we do that? And maybe it's creators, because who better builds communities than these creators who really care about the people that they speak to every day and create all kinds of content. And young people really, really enjoy it. And so we also have a couple friends in that space as well. We kind of overlap, mostly because of my personal brand, I guess, coming from the creator world. It's nice to have that kind of crossover because it does mesh so well. And so we kind of reached out to, the people that we had existing relationships with, like Taz and Alessia. And then kind of had a look at who kind of fits the brief, who has, an audience of young people that really look up to them. And so we ended up getting Georgia and Lily McCudden on. Georgia was like a YouTube queen for a really long time. And so she has a really strong audience of young girls mostly, and so does her sister. And then we got Cody from Borderline, who runs another youth mental health charity up in Brisbane. He does free youth camps, and they just have a really wonderful, clever way of approaching and speaking to the young people that they work with, and it's really life-changing for a lot of young people. So we got him down to Sydney as well. We got James Parr, who's a amputee, GQ Model of the Year, and he participated as well. We got Ella Watkins, who's I've watched her for years. She's hilarious. She does kind of comedy content, but she kind of weaved our message into comedy content, which was really funny and good. And then who else did we get? Jenna with the Pink, who lives up here in Sydney. She has a really big community of young girls who follow her kind of street style interviews. Alessia,
Yeah.
the That covered them all.
I think that was it.
Like,
I think
covered
there was
them
6
all.
of them. Yeah.
Yes, we had 6 teams. We were initially aiming for 4, and then we kind of ended up at 6.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was all just a bit of a trial, really, as this
Yeah.
first year. We didn't really know how it would work. And then Taz and Alessia ended up hosting a 24-hour live stream because that's what they do. We worked with them last year on their annual 24-hour live stream where they usually partner with a charity to raise money. They ended up raising $8,000 for us, which was just unbelievable. And this year, yeah, they wanted to do, which again is a really tangible example of the power of social media and their community strength. And so this year, given everything that's going on, everyone's being pulled in a million directions financially. They wanted to do something, with a different call to action. And so for them, the call to action was obviously do your good mate training. And so, yeah, they're awake for 24 hours on this live stream. And yeah, it was amazing seeing all the comments come through. And I've just done my training. It was amazing. And I loved learning about how cultural differences impact mental health. And I'm like, this is so special because it's like a live stream facilitation mixed with youth mental health. Like it was just like a really nice mixing of worlds. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was amazing. They got 450 people to participate in Good Mate training on the live stream. So
Wow.
yeah, it was amazing. And then also it's we've had a quote from them around, how they've polled their audience in their own community space around what is the most important um, issue facing their community, and mental health always seems to come to the very top. And so for them as this, creator brand, they want to be kind of doing their duty of care essentially around like what does our audience want and need right now, and if it is mental health related
Then
stuff that they're facing, what can we do about that? We're not the experts, so why don't we partner with ALLKND to give them this kind of action step of like, okay, well, we hear you, we understand that a lot of you are facing mental health challenges, so go and explore ALLKND because we're associated with them and we can kind of, refer on to them and be involved with them. So it's like this nice marrying of our, subject matter expertise with their audience and their power of community. And that's kind of how it unfolded with each of those creators, and then culminating in this amazing event that we had last week. Where we got to have them all in person and have some of their community members there who were just, one of them drove 7 hours to be there
wow.
Oh God.
Lily in Georgia, because she's watched them online for like 6 years and really cares about mental health and makes her own mental health films. And then so it was just like,
Wow.
oh, just again, really tangible and really special for everyone in the room to kind of feel in person what the impact actually is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, should we dive into our fun guess the
Yeah.
health condition segment?
I reckon
I'm so excited.
Let's roll with it. We've been doing this for the last few weeks. Probably last couple of months now, actually.
Yeah.
But it originally started where Maddie gave us like an impossible word to try and work out, and me and the other guests were sitting there for like a solid 20 minutes just twiddling our thumbs trying to come up with an answer. But we've gotten a lot better at it now, so we give little clues and little snippets just to make it a little bit more
This one is pretty hard, Milly, but it'll be fun. I'll give clues. When I first started, I did the first one straight off the bat, and I threw poor Zeb under the bus hard. I just did not give him any clues, and looking back on it, it was actually quite cruel. So I'll give some clues.
Yeah. And I'm in the same boat as you here because I don't actually know the word. So we can work on it together. It's okay.
Absolutely. Okay, so the condition is Harlequin ichthyosis.
What?
Harlequin ichthyosis.
All one word.
No, 2 words. Harlequin ichthyosis. And it is a genetic disorder and it's physical. That's as much as I'll give away to start.
Oh, I feel like the key word there is itch.
Yeah, is it the one where your skin essentially just keeps flaking off and you have to wrap yourself in, various bandages?
No, but I've seen that. There's a person on
Yeah.
social media that like has documented his whole journey through
Yeah.
that, and it's
Yeah.
it's inspiring, but it's
Yeah.
so hard to watch sometimes. But no, it is
Yeah.
not that.
Okay.
Oh, is it
Sort of, like you're on the right track, but not quite.
physical? It's physical, like appearance as well. You can see it.
Yes.
Ooh,
Like, is it, I think I've seen someone with it where it's like your skin is really pink and you cannot get any sun exposure and you kind of just need to keep yourself like
oh yeah.
wrapped.
I think it might be the opposite of really pink. The color's not important, but like
Okay.
if we're talking about really pink skin, it's quite fragile, it's quite thin. Think of
Yeah.
the opposite.
Is it your skin doesn't actually heal itself very well when say like it very fragile skin?
Not fragile, but healing not very well, yes. You guys are so close.
Thiosis.
So
I'm
if
trying to
it's
think of the
not-
other. What's the first word again?
Harlequin,
Harlequin.
ichthyosis. I'm getting better at pronunciation as I'm going along.
Do you have no hair on your body as well?
Ooh.
Oh,
It doesn't mention hair, but looking at the definition, I can't imagine hair being prominent.
Yeah.
So
Is
it's
it-
not fragile and it's not thin, it's the opposite.
So it's strong and thick.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Kind of
do you
think of
shed like a snake?
like,
No, that was similar to what you were talking about before, wasn't it?
not necessarily shedding. Think of kind of like the bottom of your foot in summer.
Or do you get lots of calluses? No,
Sort
lots
of.
of burning. But
Or like
bottom
an
of the
old
foot in
man's
summer.
foot without generalizing. The ones that don't really keep up with foot hygiene.
we'll go into the podiatrist.
Yeah.
um,
All right, one
anything
more
to do
guess
with
each.
anything to do with moisture, like not being able to get wet?
Yeah. Or not necessarily not being able to get wet, but you're lacking moisture.
Mm.
I'm giving it away at this point.
Don't tell me this is the whole dry skin. Dry skin.
I'm nodding. Yeah.
Is it just dry skin?
Is it just dry skin?
Okay, you're very close. I feel like all the little tidbits that you both have said would accumulate to what it actually is, but it's a
Perfect.
severe genetic disorder that causes the skin to be really thick, really hard and scaly. So like cracked and split, like you've got these like big scales and you're not able to move as much because it's so like rigid.
Wow.
And you've got a high risk of infections and dehydration.
Oh no, that sounds
Yeah.
awful.
We need to stop thinking of such
I
sad conditions.
know.
Yeah.
I think we need to change up
Yeah, I
our
know.
game because all the ones that,
The last one was I can't remember what the last one was, but there was one where it was like you can't.
was it
Go in
anaphylaxis in water?
Yeah, it was like you have an anaphylactic response
That
if you
was
touch
it.
water or something like that. And I was
And I
like,
was
oh
sharing
my
my-
gosh, it's so sad.
One of my girlfriends had it because she swims like pretty much every day through summer, and one day she just hops in and went into anaphylaxis. It was wild, but no one knew why, and now she's grown out of it. Like it lasted
Wow.
not even a year from the top of
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Crazy.
But well
So
done,
many-
you guys both did very well.
Yeah, we definitely. I feel like it sometimes gets a bit heavy with the, the word that we
I
come up with every
know.
week.
Well, that's why I
even
went
my words, I'm like now just thinking back, going, oh my gosh, I've had a lot of heavy like conditions that we've tried to get.
Just makes you feel very grateful for your
Yes.
it does.
well-being,
Yes,
doesn't
that's a
it?
good way of putting it.
Well, that's why I went to physical conditions because all the mental and psychiatric ones I was looking up, I was like, this is quite, like, it's not nice. I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Heavy. Yeah.
Yes. So obviously, sort of the Good Mate training is a peer-to-peer mental health service. How does that differ from, I guess, traditional, mental health first aid or mental health services that we often see?
Yeah, so I guess we don't actually offer any services, and this is just me kind of compartmentalizing as, a brand who offers something to the world. It's just this static product, and so it's 60 minutes and it's split up into 3 parts of the training. panic attacks, self-harm, and suicidal ideation. And so it's designed to be learned all at once. But each of those has a separate kind of action plan associated with it. And so it's MATE for all three. It's kind of repetitive to kind of get it into your head. And M is kind of the initial making the safe space and identifying whether you're the right person to be supporting this friend intermittently. And then A is the action steps, which obviously differ depending on which kind of crisis or pending crisis you're dealing with someone. And then T is what's T? T is taking time out, I believe, and then E is the exit plan. So it's kind of this narrative-based actions step-by-step plan. And yeah, it's designed to essentially, refer out. So the idea is that you should never be your friend's therapist for many reasons. The ones I touched on earlier around your own safety, but also not being able to get your friend appropriate care as well. So it's always acknowledged that you should never be your friend's therapist, and there are professionals available to support the person that you care about and you want to see get better. And so obviously those include ranging from calling 000 to going to a GP, seeking advice from community elders or family members, other trusted adults like teachers, and then kind of acknowledging that there are supports available for these varying levels of crises. There's information available, but then ultimately making sure that once you've kind of referred out, you keep kind of checking in and following up, and then also taking time out during this kind of exit plan for your own aftercare. Whether the situation went well or it didn't go well, you should still kind of acknowledge that it could have been a tricky situation to go through, and you likely did your very best with what you had available. So I think the more that we know about, what a mental health crisis or a mental health challenge can look like, and how it might affect us if we're dealing with a friend, the more compassionate we can be, not just to the people that are experiencing those, but also to ourselves. And yeah, we have published our app now very, very recently, which is called Good Mate Training on the app stores, and you basically download it and you can do your training on the app. And on the app, you also have a reference to the action plans for each of these components so that they're kind of readily available for real-time situations. And then we've got another page that has links out to 14 different crisis lines and helplines. So the idea always being that you may or may not be the right person to deal with the situation in the first instance. And then either way, it's not your job to take on this load as someone who isn't trained for it. And there are plenty of options available to refer out. And then, the conversation could kind of go on from there around wait lists and what services are actually available in your area. And that's something that we try to kind of talk about, on our social media. That's where we make space for the conversation to continue after you do the training, and, lots of different topical stuff that pops up, throughout the calendar year as well. We try to just do one thing and do it really well, but then also touch on a bunch of other kind of situations and topics that kind of are related back to our core focus.
Yeah, I really like that idea of just having this one thing and executing it to the best of your ability, because I do think that all too often, particularly in business, when you're passionate about things and you've got, a million and one ideas, you just want to do them all. And more often than not, as someone, who has personally experienced, like, you do all of them, or you do, a number of them, and they're just not how you envision them because you just lack the time and the resources to carry that out.
Yeah. And I think I really like the concept of, as well, we kind of spoke with a few psychologists now, actually, talking about the fact that there is a little bit of a struggle to get, or a wait time to actually get in to see psychologists. So having some of this mental health first aid training, not necessarily as an avenue of, you know, helping or giving advice or essentially giving people therapeutic a therapeutic outlet from the perspective of trying to take that load of being a psychologist, but actually being able to kind of manage some of these scenarios from a first aid perspective and being able to point people in the direction of the people that are going to be able to kind of help them a little bit more. I think it's fantastic as well.
But even obviously like good mate training is not the mental health first aid.
Yeah.
It's that peer-to-peer support. And following from what we were chatting about at the start of today, like as a young person, you're very reluctant to go share your struggles to adults. So you're more likely to confide in your mates, right?
Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah, they're essentially the first responders before the professionals are able to kind of support them. And no, it is mental health first aid. That's what we call it, because you are essentially providing that first intervention. And the whole idea is for it to be preventative. So if we can kind of access people, you know, before they get to these levels of crisis where they do need those emergency services, and they do need to get into you know, professional services, it's like, okay, well, how can we kind of balance things out with, you know, some preventative approach, and then also start talking more about the industry as well. It's amazing that you've had some psychs on, because there does need to be more funding in the sector, and there does need to be more incentives and support for mental health professionals going through training and things like that. It's a never-ending conversation, but I think there's a lot of people doing really good work in the space.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. My misunderstanding as well. Apologies for that.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
But what's kind of next to come for you guys? Obviously, you've just finished up with the Good Mate Championships, which is super exciting. What have you guys got in the bag? Anything that you want to spill, or not? Everything's kind of a bit of a secret at the minute, or?
Well, we've kind of just finished our big moment for the year, and the back end of the year will really just be focused on, you know, getting people through the training. And to do that, we'll probably focus on creative and strategic partnerships, which I'm really excited about, because there's a bunch of, you know, really cool organizations and brands and individuals doing work, you know, or have audiences who are Gen Z, and how can we partner on, you know, this kind of awareness campaign around, you know, preventative mental health messaging, and at the same time get, you know, more Gen Z through Good Mate training.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Amazing. I'm definitely going to check out the Good Mate training as well. Like, do it myself.
I think it'll be my next couple of hours after this, to be honest.
Absolutely. Download the app.
Yeah.
And if anyone does want to learn a little bit more about you, whether it be your personal brand or ALLKND as well, where can they find you? And we'll pop everything in the show notes as well.
Yeah, probably just our ALLKND Instagram, because I'm kind of all over that as a personal brand as well. It's you can pop it in the show notes. It's We Are ALLKND, and that's kind of our community hub, I guess, and everything's linked out from there.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to jump on today.
Thank you.
Apologies again for my coughing fits. Goodness gracious me, you did very well. Is there anything else? I think
we're all wrapped up, and thank you for promoting such an awesome message. Maddie and I both we both think very highly of the message that ALLKND kind of puts out. So we just want to thank you for doing such a good job.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you. That's so kind. And likewise, it's been a pleasure chatting with you both.
Thanks for listening to this week's podcast.
Be the first to know when the next episode drops by hitting subscribe on wherever you catch your podcasts.
And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at wedon'tknowyet.pod.
See ya.